Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. This is a roster video. I think this is number 35. We're going to be covering our marquees and unlocks. Punishing One just arrived, the major project progress towards Baylan's Skull, and GL Ahsoka. And we have just received word that Baylan's Skull is arriving soon. We'll be looking at that kit reveal sometime this week, with him probably being released the week after, but maybe even days after the kit reveal. And Crons, Omicron, Datacrons, probably not too much looking at that this week, and then covering any weaknesses as they relate to raids, ships, or pilots. Our most immediate change to our rosters is, of course, the arrival of the Punishing One, and I did take mine up to 4 stars. I got a little lucky because I only bought 2 packs. I got 12 shards in one and 7 shards in the other. I considered that pack the 5,999 pack, but that was just a little bit more than I wanted, especially if I got bad drops. Because if it was all 7s, then it was just not going to be worth it to me. So I decided 4 stars was going to be enough, and I did a little bit more cheaper than I was anticipating. So I'm just dropping these ship omegas, which means I have not done much testing with this thing yet. I just wanted to save this for the video here. And I'm going to leave off, at least for now, the reinforcement ability, because this is useless and it's not going to be how we utilize the ship. Not that it matters, obviously I could put it on. It would increase the power a little bit. I don't know if it actually matters though. But we'll be able to get some good testing over the next week of Grand Reno, where we see what we can do with this ship, which means we're probably taking Executor off of defense, even though I should probably take the Profundity off of defense based on how this ship is looking. My favorited characters, this gives an overview of who I'm actively working on, and some of the characters that I would like to take up to relics or increase relics levels on. You see characters like Brood Alpha or Grief Karga. They've been on here probably for over a year or 2 years, where these are luxury characters that are very valuable to have at relics, but aren't needed for anything. Now, before we start dropping anything, here is the overview of my gear hoard, and you can see this is looking better and better. This is just a heat map. Anything in color, things that were in deficit, and then we have different gradients of gray for different levels of having a surplus. But what this does is allow me to do some long-term planning for multiple different projects. Here, this is related to Datacrons. It includes things like Plo Koon. I've also thrown in Ezra Bridger and Exile within this column, so I can prepare for the gear investment he's going to have, although it does not reflect relic levels. This is the Baylan's Skull requirements. Does not include Baylan's Skull yet because we don't have that information, but I will be updating this immediately. So even though it looks like I'm done with a lot of gear here, as soon as we put in some of that information, it's going to balloon a little bit. Ahsoka, this is just as we know it right now. So as we get additional requirements, we're definitely going to be seeing the relic materials. These are no longer going to be in the surplus condition that we are seeing them now in. But what this does do is allow me to see where I'm a little bit lighter or weaker, and where to target and use my energy over time. And what we see is things like Kairos. I'm doing really good where Cairo computers, for all known information, I'm basically done farming, and I have to get 200 more Cairo prods. That's partly being lessened just because we're actively farming shards. I'm not farming Cairo prods at the level that I was. And with all these Gear 12 Plus materials, a lot of these I had been in deficit previously, but now what I'm doing is I'm looking at some of these that I only have like a double-digit surplus and targeting those to bring up to a triple-digit surplus, so that as any new characters and requirements become known, then it doesn't bring me negative. I'm in a little bit more of a flexible position to maintain these surpluses of materials. Because like Baylan's Skull, as soon as he shows up, assuming that he's going to be a difficult to gear character, I think that would be a safe assumption. We're going to be knocked down on things like fusion furnaces. We could very easily see him take like 3 fusion furnaces in order to get to relics. But if you've been seeing this week in, week out, and see that as each requirement has been added, or as we get new characters, new marquee characters, whenever I do go negative, it's very briefly, because I've been prepared to absorb any new requirements because of places like here with any of my guild and raid currency, with that Mark III currency, throwing it towards these impulse detectors or Zinbidi cards, just building up these numbers, because these are a little bit of a pain to accumulate, and they do take time, which shifts us to these major projects where you can see I've got a lot of progress here on the Ahsoka requirements with these farms. With Night Trooper here, we're done. And I'm not taking him up to relics. I'm satisfied for now because this team is strong even at low stars and gear 11. I will take the time to maintain the flexibility with the signal data and those other relic materials so that I can work on other characters as they appear. The signal data is definitely the toughest thing to come by. With Judge Death now at 6 stars, not going to take too much longer, just through probably the anniversary, right around the anniversary awards, we will probably have him at 7 stars, which will be nice because I really need to get back to farming those materials for Bronzium wiring. So we'll talk about that right in a moment after we throw stars on Captain Enoch, who just became farmable over on light side. And this is really one of those characters that preventing me from throwing resources towards that chiroprod node, which lets us build up the Bronzium wirings, because I am now in a position with the Bronzium wirings that most of you all have been in for a long time. I've been able to avoid that because of how I have minimized the amount of relics on my account. It's made it easier for me to have a lot of Bronzium wirings, especially because my account's old. But in regards to these Bronzium wirings, I've made an adjustment. There's a lot more materials that I am building out. Before it was just this Fabritech data pad where this drops with the chiroprod. I was just relying on this. You could get a good amount of these just by normal farming through those prods with any excess energy. I don't even refresh the light side dark side energy if I'm not actively farming. I actually could do additional refreshes right now and throw that towards the chiroprod, but I'm holding back to maintain crystals because with crystals I don't like to spend more than I earn. But I have shifted a lot of my guild and other currency purchases to start building up surpluses in all of these other pieces. I'm sure a lot of you guys have been doing this because it's been a bigger concern, Bronzium wirings, for a lot of you players. But I haven't. I've been using a lot of my old guild currency just towards shards, because shard shop currency is usually my biggest need. But now I've gone to start buying a lot of these pieces. Now, above 500, I'm a little satisfied, so you're not seeing me buy this one. But I'm grabbing all these other pieces so that I have more currency to make more Bronzium wirings with, because there's a good return on investment with actually crafting Bronzium wiring that I don't feel is true about those carbonate circuit boards. Those are just crystals all the time. Those just aren't worth it. And I think I'm going to make a video about this in the future, but while we're here and talking about some of these things, I wanted to say something, because I know everybody knows like the Blast Tech mods buy those with the guild currency. You should also be buying pretty much every one of these cheap pieces, because when it comes to the chromium transistors, like yes, this piece is fully crafted, but you can also be buying a lot of the ingredients. Like you can buy these you should be buying anyway because you need an insane amount of these as you're developing your account. These are consumed in like quantities of 30 or 60 or something when you're working on certain pieces on certain characters, so they go very quickly. Now that I'm brought everybody up to gear 11, I just have a massive amount of these, but while you're account in development, you just need a ton. But now I can convert those into additional chromium transistors. And the same thing as you look at these, we have both of these pieces. Both of these are purchasable with guild currency. Now you could shift those into production of, I believe those turn into carbonate circuit boards. Or yes, you can see right here you have that Mark II thermal. Those, again, I just don't think is really worth the return because you need a ton of them just to make one piece. It's just not efficient. So I'd rather utilize them to make even more chromium transistors, although I'm at a level where I'm just never going to need these. And the same thing here. This one was previously what people used to make chromium transistors out of, this Mark 7 ball armor, because that was the first one that I recall people talking about. But the problem with this is you need to use these stun cuffs, and you need a lot of these stun cuffs. Even with a mature account of like my own, you just don't have a lot. Like I still donate them whenever anybody requests them, but it's somewhat difficult to build up a surplus of those. So sometime in November we'll be done with Judge Death. Captain Enoch probably early to mid-December we'll have completed, and CG really needs to give us the rest of these requirements. That's getting a little annoying. One thing that we will do though, even though we are done with Morgan Elsbeth, what I've been doing through my first week of testing with her at Relics is Relic 3 just does not cut it. She just goes down way too quickly, which impacts the ability to really do any cheap counters. So I'm definitely prepared to take her up to Relic 5. I'm considering just taking up to Relic 7 right now. We've already budgeted for her gear pieces, and I think having having that difference is going to be worth it. Although I am curious to see if Relic 5 will be sufficient for any of those players who are looking for these incremental levels of utility. Actually, I think I've talked myself into it. We'll stop here. We'll see if Relic 5 is more useful than Relic 3, but I can definitively say that Relic 3 is not going to be useful enough for low-level usage, at least not in 5v5. Maybe in 3v3 where it was much easier for like a Gungan counter to take out Boss Nass. I have not taken out Boss Nass at all with a Relic 3 in 5v5, and I was able to take out Boss Nass in 3v3 with a Gear 11 Morgan Elsbeth. There's one small change I want to make to Spirit and Acolyte. I'm going to take them to Relic 1. I don't want to mess with signal data, but since we don't need any to get to Relic 1, we're going to do it. They're just not doing enough damage right now to be useful when I'm doing that Morgan Elsbeth testing. Hopefully this helps a little bit. I'm tempted to do another level, but the difference between like Relic 1 and Relic 2 is like almost meaningless. And we'll just do the same with Acolytes. Just make a little bit of tiny progress. It does deplete some of my circuit boards though, because I have not budgeted for these characters yet. I probably should. The next set of Datacrons is already in game. You can check it out here in the Datacron shipment store by just clicking on the Datacron and hitting the info section here. Most of you guys are going to know about this by now. And I'm starting my preparation. We're going to have a full video breaking down these Datacrons soon. But here's an overview of how I'm looking at them. Now, this is not reflective of how strong I think this are. This is more of a reflection of my preparedness and what I'm going to go after versus not go after. Now, we have the online Force user crons up at the top, although we do have Jolie in here. What we're seeing as a trend within this set is if you have a mature account, this goes heavily towards a lot of characters that we all already have at Relics, and I think that's a little bit reflective within the quality of these crons. I think there's much fewer in terms of game changers that we've seen previously. Now, I do think both the Starkiller and Mara Jade crons are very good. I'm not sure which one I have a preference for. Right now I'm leaning towards Mara Jade because it does more, although the Starkiller level 9, simple but powerful. Malicos, Maul, those are all going to be very good. Kylo Ren might be useful as well, but the problem with Kylo's is it's going to be a little redundant where you're not going to use it over Malicos. And Grand Inquisitor, probably my preference, but again, we're seeing a situation with Grand Inquisitor and 8th Brother where really you're choosing between the two of them. Jolie, I have at Relic 8 because of TB and helping out the guild. That's definitely one that I'm going to be pushing for. And then we see the start of our mercenaries. We'll be able to like throw in Django. That will take over like in my trench squad, replace Watts after Watts expires. Or seeing maybe we're looking at a situation where hers or Dengar's is working with like the boss in lieu of the boss Datacron when that expires, although that one isn't very meaningful. Hondo's, Shinhati. Juhani's one where I don't have relics, but if it were powerful, I would throw that character to relics. It's one where I've been looking for an excuse to take her to relics, but I'm probably not going to do it. It's one of those things where like throw her in a Starkiller squad, I'm one character away from being able to utilize that Datacron, and those are Datacrons I will consider versus like Sortie. I'd like to have a Sortie squad at relics, but you can see T3M4 who also has a Datacron. I'm multiple relics away from being able to utilize those Datacrons, which makes it far less likely that I'm going to go after them. Although I might give myself the option, since that's a squad I would like to have fully relics. And then we have the Old Republic crons. Those, like each of these are good crons, but we're in a situation where most of that faction, especially the Karth squad itself, is just way too far away from being able to utilize Datacrons. It's several relics away from relevancy. And before we wrap up here, characters like Shinhati, all these newer marquee characters that even though I don't have them fully farmed, I always go after the Datacrons because I do expect that I will have them at relics prior to the expiration of the crons. And even a month or two, even a couple weeks of utility of those crons is worth it to me. We see that in these older sets. I've already done the same thing where I have Morgan Elsbeth, or I have, God, I wish we could just scroll left to right from this screen. And we see that with these older sets of crons where I have done that preparatory work where we have Morgan Elsbeth, Captain Enoch, Judge Death, all those crons are ready for when those squads get brought up to 7 stars and relics, and we've done that with old sets previously as well. Because it's all about maximizing my options additions and increasing the threat level of my roster, even if for a short period of time. I feel like a lot of players, they can't use this Cron immediately, so they forget about it, not anticipating they're going to be around for 4 months. There are opportunities to be had here. Now, we do have a raid update because I made a surprising realization. With Darth Sidious here, I had left off the Zeta ability. I just thought that, because I didn't use it for the event, for the Lord Vader event, since the update, and I didn't get it Lord Vader until recently. It's not necessary, and I just kind of thought it was the Omicron. So I've been doing several months now of the raid, or maybe not several months, but however long it's been without that Cron, and it has made things a little bit easier, but it hasn't really changed the end result of the squad. I was still able to do fairly well without it, but it does make a difference. But I do think that's going to wrap it up for this week with all like these other luxury characters that I utilize. These characters, I'm not putting anything towards signal data because I need all the signal data I can get, so they're not going to be touched. Although I'm getting to a point on Kairos where bringing these resistance characters up to gear 12, that I would like to do. That is now getting closer and closer to becoming an option, whereas before I just didn't want to drop the Kairos on these characters. And with us being a week away from the last conquest in this set of 3 for Ezra Bridger, I've been able to get away with it without adding relics to like my spy or my geos, and we're just going to continue doing that because it's just going to get easier and easier now that I have a number of these characters at higher gear and relics. We'll wrap it up there. I will be traveling in about a week for a week, although I do expect that I'm still going to be able to do content while I'm away, possibly even more since I won't have as much of my normal workload to handle. So thank you for watching. Be excellent to each other, everybody. This is still Plays Galaxy of Heroes.